This morning, so it's good to see you, but good to see new faces as well. I'll walk around and I'm not going to stand here the whole time, so don't worry. I'm standing here. Yeah. So, you may in a minute just want to group yourself together with maybe similar sports, coaches of the similar sport or the same sport. So be prepared for that just in a few minutes. I'll just go through some slides at the beginning. Yeah, that's a picture there of the GB hockey environment and Danny Kerry and his assistant coach. You'll see there in the learning room, they call it a learning space, and it's right next to the training pitch at Bisham Abbey. So the players will train and they'll go into the little room next door, watch some videos, write up on the wall what they've learned. And some of you may have some similar spaces. Does anybody go straight from the training venue into a room and do you discuss and they go straight back and train again? Or do you just normally practice and then finish and that's it and you do your reviews later? Yeah, some nodding, people switch, okay. Well, you get better learning and better transfer if you can, so this is laser. You see the white walls here, the girls are writing up what they've learned and the opportunities they've missed quite quickly. You can only rub that off if you have learned something new and it exceeds what they've learned and you can rub it off. So you have to have permission to rub it off. So it's only new learnings that are written on, otherwise they just stay on there. It's very much like this room actually, because you see on the floor, there's a hockey pitch on the floor, a bit like, you know, this track here around the outside, and there are some seats around the outsides. You can't see them, but that's the beginning of it. And they're oval seats, and everyone faces the hockey pitch, and they've got small players they can move around tactically. So those of you who are a little bit older, remember Sabusio? Yeah, football. That helped create thinking players. It helped create players who tactically think about the game. So, you know, anything that can bring that back a little bit is really good. So the girls come in here and they lay out some plans and tactics, go and train, and then adapt it as a result. So that's a really healthy learning space, learning environment. What I wanted to show you now is just a slide about a learning environment. So have a look at this. Some of you may have seen it. There's two dimensions. On the top is a dimension of what we call safe. Safe and unsafe. And on the left to the right is certainty, uncertainty. The research is showing us right now that this particular slide here, and I've got some colours which may come up, that you'll see the green is the top right. Traditionally, most practice environments, learning environments, take place in safe certainty. And what we're looking at, this is limiting learning, particularly whereas players accelerate through and play at more an advanced level. They can't handle the uncertainty, they can't problem solve, they don't necessarily have the movement skills. The movement adaptation, Tom was speaking before about the literacy, they don't have these solutions, be it mentally or physically. So shifting from the left to the right is really important as you're coaching right now. So a learning environment should have a little bit of all of this, but primarily we're moving athletes into the right-hand side. Some of the benefits will be adaptive training. And we talked about this morning, how do you manipulate constraints to get more adaptive movement, adaptive thinking, tactical dexterity. Danny Kerry, England football have gone down this route with DNA. They're trying to make their players more tactically smarter since that World Cup when, excuse the pun, they froze against Iceland. You know, and because they train in safe certainty. They train expecting something to happen. When it doesn't happen, shit, what do we do? So in essence, we're trying to get people to be more comfortable here. How do you plan sessions to equip players with the skills to operate in here? One of the players in England football said, why wouldn't you put a player down here in unsafe uncertainty at times? And often, some players don't get educated in how to deal with the media. So they get, after a big game, they get interviewed and they're put on the spot and they say the wrong thing and they panic because they think the coach is going to rip into them the next day. They've said the wrong thing in the newspaper. Well, that's unsafe and that's uncertain. But if you had a coach who said, Jim, don't worry about it, mate. Look, what have you learned from being interviewed by the Telegraph newspaper? Well, can't trust them. Yeah, that's one thing. Well, watch what you say. Say things where maybe, this might be, or it depends, instead of getting too heated. So look, there's learning moments. So you're putting it in unsafe, uncertain, but you bring it back to safety. You're going to support your player. So one of the big things in coaching is support, unconditional support for your players' decision making. They'll all make mistakes, but they need to know that you're going to help them make better decisions. Okay? It's not a mistake, it's not that, it's just a poor decision. How can you make a better decision next time around? So that goes for training and off field as well, depending on what the sport is. Athletes tend to learn more in here. It's more active here. And I'll turn to the next slide because it's probably a bit better. If you look at the things in the corners here, over here, they go through autopilot. They live in the comfort zone. Practice is about rehearsing. It's very repetitious, bit of boredom, they get complacent, complete security, sort of turning the handle. Over here, more adaptive. We talked about repetition without the repetition. We talked about that this morning. It's very challenging, a lot of exploration. Athletes have to self-regulate. So you'll hear this term a lot. We're making a big shift in the UK right now, particularly England football and a lot of the team sports, is making players more responsible, giving them the skill sets to take responsibility for their performance and making them accountable. I feel quite strongly about this because the more money in the sport there is, like Premiership football, the less accountable they want to be. They want the coach to get the sack before they do, because then they're going to last another 2 years on the contract. So they'll stay quiet, they'll lose the coach deliberately, won't speak, and the coach loses the dressing room and the coach is going to be gone. If we're going to have responsible athletes, they need to be responsible for their performances and take accountability. We'll support them, but you have to change the culture with which football and other sports is actually coached and the learning environment that they're placed in as well. We're going to chat a bit about this in our groups and feedback, but that's a general viewpoint here. Bottom left and bottom right we can go into in our group meetings. So it's a shift to the right there. It's not easy. Eddie tried to do it in 2 weeks. He goes on a world record running streak with the team. Champ transformed it, but that can only get tested under pressure. And the last Six Nations is pressure. So we're finding out actually who feels safe at the moment. Who will revert back to tight or default. They'll go back to the left. There will be some players who will be more comfortable going back to the left right now. Yet the people like Owen Farrell, some of the players are saying, no, this is where we need to be to win the World Cup. And in New Zealand they call it the learning dip. So performance will go down, and inside that well, they call it the learning ditch, learning dip. Inside of there is where the players develop the skills to get back out, so performance improves. You have to help the players get out of the learning dip, okay, so they can get out of there themselves. And that's what is happening right now in a number of sports in England, really. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is just get into small groups. You do that however you like, similar sports or people that you know. But what I want you to do is, from the last few slides, just talk about who actually has ownership and responsibility in your environment and your sport, maybe traditionally. What's Eddie just said in a summary right now? What's he just said about English rugby? It's gone from what to what? It's gone from 0 Yeah, it's gone to about 60% where players now are leading the training sessions. They're often saying what they want to do, what they don't want to do. And to 99, I think he said, which basically says, well, the coach is going to be out of a job by the time the World Cup comes around. But that's his vision. His vision is to make himself redundant by the World Cup in Japan. So it's, you know, it's interesting to see with a series of losses that have just occurred, how much dependency the players are placing in the coaches right now. How much dependency. So just get into some groups now and then we'll feed back. So just get into equal groups of say, you know, 5 or 6 and chat about that sort of concept of responsibility in the environment for your players, okay? Give you about 5-10 minutes. It's fine, you can carry on speaking in a minute. We'll just sort of bring the group together a little bit. So what are some of the challenges and also some of the things that are working really well in the learning environments over here? And don't forget, you're not trying to copy a perfect learning environment. That model there is just a suggestion as to what are the needs of our athletes moving forward. So moving from the left to the right, obviously we may not be there right at the moment, but that's a general trend of what's happening. Players to perform well at the highest level need a lot of those skill sets. All Blacks, New Zealand probably went there in about 2005, underway, but they weren't ready for it early on. He got sacked from the Crusaders quite early on because the players weren't ready. So go away, work with the academy, but 3 years later he moves up and then start to get the big jobs because the players actually excel under that. But look, what are the challenges? And I just heard one of the gentlemen here, archery coach, was it? Actually, do you want to mention out what one of the challenges may be for archery and yourself in the learning environment? Okay. You've got a microphone there next to you.
No, it's okay. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm an archery coach. I've been coaching for almost 10 years. And the challenges that we face is similar to what we are here for. Now we already started, for me, I already started giving the responsibility to our archers, to our students. But initially there's a bit skeptical about handling the situation. But our motto is very simple, dare to fail. You go. Then we will guide them and we help them. We in fact also help the parents, train the parents to coach the children. This is our approach. And it works well, but there is some resistance here and there because our style may be different. So I'm very happy that we are in line for what we are hearing here now. Yes.
Yeah, good. Any similar experiences where your athletes they go away and they get coached by another coach? They're moving to 3 or 4, 2 or 3 different environments? Is that happening? Because the messages can, in today's sport, some athletes are getting 3 to 4 different coaches and they're getting mixed messages, and it happens a lot. And the time, particularly in some of the environments I'm working in, they only have the athletes for a certain amount of time, and they spend more time in, say, the club environment, of which that's where they generally will practice their habits and their skills. And when they come into another environment and you expect them to have responsibility, they don't want that, or they're not used to it. Just coming out of school, they're being told what to do all day at school. Depends what the education system's like here, but mostly the schools that I've been into in England, you get sat down, you talk to a hell of a lot, and you have to take in this information, and then at the end of school you go, say, a training session, and suddenly you're going to get talked to again by a coach. Right, we're going to do this, this is the drill, this is this, this is that. They just want to run around. For 10 minutes, they just want to run. They want to exercise, free the mind, and then after that they come back, and now they're ready to listen. But it's those mixtures of environments. So just going around the group, what are some of the challenges that you're facing in the learning environment that you guys are in? So each of the groups, just have anybody yell out 1 or 2 things. What are some of the challenges that you're facing? Or some of the strengths that you've developed in your learning environments? So let's start with that group there. You just yell out a couple of things. You could be Father Christmas.
Children in our culture are very used to being told what to do.
Really? Why is that? You're not one of them, are you?
Our education system.
Are you one of them?
Yeah.
So if I tell you something, you'll do it right now, yeah?
Maybe not now.
No, so these are the habits. You've got to make people feel a little, I'm not making you feel uncomfortable, but who has ever gone with their athletes and what you call a huddle? You know, when they have a rest, they come in for a huddle. Who's normally the first to speak? Coach, yeah. Why would it be the coach? What, is it our job to give feedback? Those of you who listened this morning, who's the first person who normally gives the feedback? Yeah, your peer mates, teammates, the person who's training with you. So when you go to the huddle, an effective learning environment would look like what? Before they even get there, they're problem solving. They're talking before they even get there. The reason for a huddle, the purpose for a huddle is to have a drink. You do your tactical problem solving on the way there, you get there, you have your drink, you're off. It's not the time for the coach to look good. It's my time now. Right, you should be doing this, more communication, you should be over here, you should be doing that. You've got to move away from that a little bit. Let them come up with a strategy, or you help them with that, but they're responsible for what they're doing. Come to the huddle, they're already talking. Jimmy, you should be with me. Where are you? You know, they're talking all the time in the game. It's hard to get there straight away, but that's a process you should try and get through. It's really challenging, but it's fun. And we do little things like silence. So every now and then, just go to the huddle. If you know your players well and they trust you, just go there and don't say a word. Just look at them. And it's going to be very, very awkward. It'll be very uncomfortable because they're all going to look at you. I'm looking at Tom now. Tom, come say something. Eh? Say something. Shit. Say something. Tom's not saying anything. Jesus. And you'll notice the heads go down. And then they're like a bit shy. Who's going to say the first thing? Generally it will be the coach. Who wins the battle? Yeah, the players win. As soon as you say something, phew, I don't have to say anything now. Thank God for that. Alright? I don't have to take responsibility. Back to the coach. You've got to break those cycles as young kids because it's being generated a lot in education. Depends what type of parents they have, the upbringing they've had. You've got to check all that out. Alright? And treat them as individuals. Everyone's a bit different, but teach them to take responsibility. You've got to come up with a plan for this game, boys. No matter how silly it is, let them do it. Once you've got something, you can work with and influence that now, and you can say, well, what about this? Have you tried this? And, that's brilliant, so really good. Sorry, I made a big answer there, wasn't it? Anything else from you guys? Any other challenges? Come on, you must have some. Everything's going perfect, yeah?
I think that the other question we had is whether this sort of learning is applicable for younger children, given that there's a huge range of abilities.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
My own opinion is that it can be applied.
Yes.
I think different teammates have different opinions.
Brilliant. But yeah, and don't worry about conforming, but who thinks it should apply and it should be there for young kids all the time? This sort of environment. Okay. Maybe it's culturally different in Singapore. I've been here for a while, but I think, you know, you have a right to express yourself in sport. Sport is a vehicle to express yourself. That's what it's there for. They're not robots. Number 7 is not meant to play like a number 7. He's there because he's Jim. And there are certain roles of a 7, but that doesn't dictate how you coach. That's a bit of a responsibility, but he's got to affect the game in his way. And as a young player, you need as a coach to inspire that. Let him know what he's good at. Often we go to academies and have, I'm good at this, no good at this, crap at this. And where do they look at when they get those IDPs? Generally, where would they look when they get them? Yeah, they look at the bottom where it's red. You treat them like, oh, crikey, I'm not good at this. They should really be expanding what they're good at, okay? Think of a picture in your mind right now of performance. What is your picture of performance? Because as a coach, I always do it in coach development and it's really good. Try and think of a picture that describes your philosophy of performance or development. And we do it on level 4 in England Rugby. And one of the best ones I had was a guy said, a ship, like a pirate ship, and we're going to go and explore, and we're going to take new successes and bring it back. But for the ship to go fast, you need big masts. You need big sails so the wind can blow us and go really, really fast, so good performance. And they're the strengths, and he said, what's slowing us down is the water line on the boat. If the water line goes below the surface of the water, it slows the boat down. So make sure that's just above the water line. So the way his philosophy was about learning was about athletes not focusing too much on what the teachers and coaches have been telling them they're bad at, what they've got to work at. It was actually having super strengths. It was actually being, this is me, this is what I'm good at. And your teammates start to put you in a situation where you start to look good. And that's how they learn to be selfless and teammates. And you do it for them as well. You put them into situations that can make them use their strengths. And that is the difference between, say, like teams like New Zealand. England can't do that. They generally will be position specific. They get chosen on, you're a great 7, you come in. So when they come into camps, they don't see each other, and what I call a skill of recognising each other quickly. What are you good at? And we go to training, we watch each other, and then I start to understand how you play. That is a skill. We don't learn that in England, but we're starting to pick it up now in our national pathway. So yeah, that's a learning environment that takes the best out of all the players. You guys? Pass that around. Anything?
I think it was quite similar to the other group. So we were discussing whether it's appropriate for a certain age group. And my friend here is teaching fundamental movement skills. So how much of it has got to do with being coach directed, and whether it can be actually player directed.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think it should be.
Do you want to put the microphone on and speak to the group, mate? Just stand up in the middle, mate. I know you look really confident, so go on, mate.
Okay, my opinion is probably it depends on the age group. I personally use this method of coaching with my athletes, and I see taking charge of the whole session a lot more, or taking charge of your play a lot more. But probably my opinion is, if they are younger, they still require a little bit of structure. So on the background, there should be some structure, and maybe a proportion of the coaching session will then be something like incorporating these things.
Absolutely, yeah, good, brilliant. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, really. Again, I would come back to what are the needs of your learners or the needs of your athletes, and if they don't have the ability or the capability. Who remembers this morning in the middle, what did I put? Intention, attention, capabilities, opportunities. You're giving your players an opportunity. If you don't think they've got the capability to meet that opportunity, well, you've got to disseminate knowledge. I would call structure principles. I don't like the word structure. In essence, structure means I take away your responsibility to make a decision. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to give you a set of principles to warm up. You now create your own structure for the warm-up. Because if they can create an environment that they've designed that suits them, you don't have to ask them to buy in. Never use the word buy in, because it means you're selling them a car or something and they want to have to buy it. They came up with it. If you give them a set of principles and explain and they understand, they designed something, and then you can question them and say, why did you do this? Do you think you should have done that? And they will therefore be very aware of what they're doing. But I totally agree with you. You may want to lead a bit more, further down, of course. But when it comes down to the research, unstructured play is so important. And I actually think that kids at a younger age group should have fun designing things and make loads of mistakes. Because later on in life, you make less mistakes, but they're more costly. You can kill yourself crossing the road if you're not aware of cars. So early on in life, you've got to look around, but there's less danger, say, in the school ground where people are running. You create awareness. But in schools in England, you can't run anymore in the playgrounds. What's happening? There's no play equipment in the play yards now where kids can fall off because they're going to break a leg. So parents are having to write letters into schools now to say, I will give you permission for my children to climb trees. Please let them climb a tree. Because the teachers don't want to take that responsibility. They want to push it off to a parent. It's incredible what's happening right now. So we talk about fundamental movement skills. They're not happening for a reason, because we're not freely moving. We don't have I know we've got Tom here with movement literacy and Vince as well, and We talk about the athletic skills model over in Ajax, and I think the general movements are going now. Back in my day, we did judo, gymnastics at school, we did judo. Gymnastics stopped as a sport at the AIS. They kicked it out after we won some medals. It just disappeared as a sport, and then they had to knock on the door of every other sport and say, could we join you? We will teach your kids gymnastics at an early age, and it will benefit the movement ability. So when they specialise later on, they can specialise quicker, and the performance improves. So general movements, and then specifying in your movement skills for that particular sport happens later. So in New Zealand, they have broader later, as many as possible, broader and selection later. It's more about talent development than talent selection. It's more about developing your potential, developing your capability. It's very individualised, and that's what the environments are that we're challenged now to place our players in. But generally, I think our players are becoming less skilled in a number of areas, and I think that's the challenge for our learning environment. So yeah, really, really good from that last script. Can you guys start with Leo? Thanks, man.
The problem is that we face, we are badminton coaches. So for us, the main problem is that when we try this kind of coaching, much of our culture here is still very traditional, in the sense from the schools and providers to the parents that inquire our services. So sometimes we will get their senior players to come back and play with them, and sometimes I will design certain games with constraints, but in the eyes of the teacher and the parents, I'm just letting them play. Yeah. So the traditional sense of training is me, shouting, giving instructions and all that.
Lots of markers.
Yeah. So whenever we tell them this kind of training plan, it'll be like, you're just trying to find the easier way out. Training is, you getting involved. When actually I will tell them that am I the one who's going to play the game? Yeah. Or is he going to play the game?
Yeah.
Is it more important for the coach to be engaged in the training, or the player engaged in his or her training?
Yeah.
But this is the problem, because this training idea here has two problems. One is, if you're teaching the fundamental each group, engagement, it can vary. It depends on the maturity of the student. Yeah. The second part is the cultural expectation. That's the main problem. Because for this kind of learning to really blossom, the culture needs to really open up. Because if we are so used to a static way of learning, it's very hard to change.
So just an answer to that from you people, because what do you think? Someone said, didn't you, the tradition over here is you get told, yeah? Or you get given the answer. So who's doing something different to that right now? Who's doing something to change the culture here right now? Could you pass the microphone on? And this is like one of these talk show hosts. It's like politics time.
Hi, my name is Chris. I mainly coach handball. It's a team sport. A couple of months ago, I started trying something with, I worked on a project with someone from SSI. So what we did was we tried to incorporate a culture where the team captain and co-captains take responsibility during training. So they decide what they want to do for the day. And after the training, we always have a debrief with the team. And after that, I would have a debrief with the two captains. Why you decide to do this and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the ultimate goal, the objective we want to achieve is during the games, the matches, the captains actually go as far as to decide who they should place in the game. So the coach will be taking a step back. And then they will also then develop ownership on how the game goes. So unless it's a very, what we call a critical error, the coaches will not get involved. Even if it is a critical error, if we think that it's a game we can afford to lose, we'll let them go ahead and make the mistake. And then after that, we can talk about why they choose to let those players play at the time.
Yeah, it's a good learning moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what I think you're doing there is, I've got a microphone, is you're observing. The skill of a coach is to observe, isn't it? You're observing the interaction players in the game. You're looking at the moments and you're not intervening too early. If you intervene, they're going to lose out on that learning opportunity, which is really, I think, what you're saying, which is fantastic. It takes courage, doesn't it? Have you got a philosophy? Have your coaches talked to
management for results?
Yeah.
Especially a lot of coaches when you're coaching schools and even outside coaching private athletes, the parents or the schools who pay you, they expect results.
Yes. So, I mean, it comes back to your points, which were two of the best points, really. In England, there are some very high fee-paying schools, aren't there, Tom? I mean, I've been to a couple, Tunbridge School, pay £50,000 a year. Shit. And you start to think, excuse my French, but you go there and the kids expect. They expect you to give them all the solutions to win the game. But we're changing things right now. There's a coach there who will video messy training and the clips get sent back to the parents. And the parents have to analyse the clips with their kids. And the kids now are coaching the parents, watching the clips going, we did this because of this. And the parents now are learning through messy practice on small video clips that are sent back by the coach. And the parents are coming back and they've seen a big sort of shift in mindset. You will get some problem parents, and of course what I'd probably recommend sometimes is draw up a little stat sheet, like a performance analyst sheet, and design it in such a way that they go looking for different things. Numbers of passes, or inclusions, or how much ball movement there was, and they come back to you going, there were more passes last week, why wasn't there much of this week? Well, we've done too many drills, too many markers. Well, let's get rid of them then, and you can actually influence in different ways. Yeah, but I love the video clips going back to the parents, and the kids were actually coaching the parents, and the parents took a massive interest. And so the way the parents relate to the kids is different. They sort of went away from, how did you go, did you win? And that sort of stuff, which is very outcome performance related. Of course it's not bad. Kids are competitive, they want to win. But kids forget. 20 minutes later, they're playing with their friends. They're having a great time. Who's constantly reminding them, the coach and the parents, that they lost? By asking them, shit, yeah, we did lose, didn't we? The head goes down again. But they would have forgotten. They moved on really quickly. So it's about their needs. Tune into their needs. But fantastic, really, really good. Tom, anything?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, we were talking about players being trained early and getting the best of. So we've got about 5 or 6 players from Singapore who are at those best schools now. A couple of them, as you know, are in the England training squad, and they get spoiled. They go to the best schools, they go to university where there isn't a focus on the best players because they become reliant on the best coaches, the best equipment. When they get to university, they feel that they're no longer the centre of attraction and they drift away from the sport because they become over-reliant on their coaching support systems. And so we're actually short-term we're improving performance, but long-term we're diminishing because they're coach-reliant and they're falling away from the game.
So I think in our learning environments, one thing I stress is a responsibility of coaches to create a learning environment where children explore. They explore the environment, they explore sport. If you do a subject like maths, science, how often do you have an exam over here? How often? Oh shit, I've come to the wrong country. I was expecting, what, once every half a year or something? It means you can disappear and then come back when the exams are on. Well, jeez. Well, normally when I ask cultures, they go, once every semester or every 2 semesters or whatever. And whereas you look at, say, sport, you've got a match every week. So that's like a test. So actually talking to coaches about how do you measure learning and development? Are you doing it through the way they play on Saturday and every assignment and every exam? There's no tactical exam for rugby or football or soccer or some of these sports. I mean, archery, if you look at archery, why aren't we setting tactical exams for them to say, how do the Koreans play archery? How do they train? Have you done your homework? There's a subject now for archery in school or clubs. You have to pass it. You can't just come here and just win comps. So I would give that to the so-called kids who are high achievers and knock their heads down a little bit, make them think, well, you've got to learn now about the sport. culturally, sport is different in all these cultures and countries. Learn about them. Because archery has a different meaning in different countries and is trained differently. Understand it. And then you'll appreciate other nations and other athletes. And then you may train differently as a result. You may actually learn from it as well. So I think there's a lot we can do to put people in more uncomfortable situations to learn more. But make them feel safe as well. Don't bully them. Just make them feel safe, but growth mindset. Coach, hopefully you can hear him. Do you want to press the play, Vince? Vince, can you just press the space bar?
That's pretty random chaos. And changed it slightly. I only told a few people that 2 whistles we're going to the top mark. Everyone else is going to the bottom, so there's only a random few who know we go to the top and 2 whistles come on. I didn't try to work. Keep on. Yes. Okay. So I changed the
Okay, international coach. World class, successful. Oh, what did he say? Did anybody hear it? He said random chaos, and then when he blew the whistle, what did he say? That didn't actually work, did it? That's the sign of a quality coach. They try something, doesn't work. And what happens is the sailors come back and they said, why did you blow the whistle too early? They actually innovate the drill. Because they're involved, they're engaged in it, they're part of it. They are the game, they are the drill. So they'll come over and they'll banter with the coach, going, hey, that didn't work, did it? He got loads from the sailors after that, and then they improved it, and that's turned into a really, really great session. As a coach, what's the key here is you have to explore and try and be creative and experiment with your athletes and have the environment where you can do that. I hear too often, I might lose credibility, the athletes want to hear me, I've got to have the solution. Do they? Is that what you think? It's not necessarily what they think. Build a rapport with them, build trust. Try something out. The reason why it didn't work is what? Why do things fail? Because you fail to what? Fail to adapt. There's no such thing as failure, you're just failing to adapt. So next time, adapt within the drill. If the sailors think it's impossible because you've set the rules are not possible, ask the athlete, well, what rules do you want? And they'll say, well, if we need to develop this, make the rule into this. And they will actually design their own environments with you. So the All Blacks document, I'll show you in a minute, they are innovating the game. Unfortunately, they're so far ahead, and everyone's reacting off them, and their players innovate the coaching sessions. The coaches sit back now and actually just hold the players accountable. And it's got to a point where, you know, it's hard to catch them up a little bit. Just have a quick listen. This is a clip from a researcher in Canada. Just jot some notes and then chat in your group.
Elaine Ratman has made a career charting the conduct of coaches, spectators, and players in organized sports for kids.
Generally, I think what happens is you see kids that are not engaged. They don't have to think for themselves. I've gone in and done workshops with groups of kids that unless you give them step-by-step instructions on how to do something, they just sit around because they haven't been told what to do. It's like they have no initiative. They don't have that creative impulse. They have no problem-solving skills. They don't even talk to each other. They just sit around and wait for someone else, an adult, to tell them what to do.
Bill Fowler spent 33 years teaching play studies at Master University.
You want to eliminate structure because it's a gauge for them as to what they are. But we have to get away from this role playing that constantly goes on in structured sporting. Like you'll notice it with these kids, they have a role to play. And they're put in that that role by a coach for an obvious reason. It's going to help the competitive side of things, that if he is not touching the ball very much, there's a reason for it. He's being excluded because he doesn't do it all that well.
Stats show us that 5% of all kids are considered to be athletically gifted. The problem is that our system right now is set up to serve that 5%. So that means 95% of the kids don't really do well. They're not engaged. They're not having fun. They don't necessarily get a positive self-esteem, positive self-image from being on these sports teams because they're not being played. They don't get to touch the ball. It isn't serving them a real positive purpose.
Structured play may have its critics, but what's so special about its alternative? Ironically, what we once thought of as wasted time, free, unstructured play, turns out to be nothing less than nature's way of making sure kids learn.
What do kids get out of free time? They learn cooperation, they learn communication, they learn how to be creative problem solvers, they learn conflict resolution, interpersonal skills, social skills. That's emotional intelligence. That's how those skills are learned. If there are always parents there managing that and guiding that interaction, those kids never learn how to do that themselves.
When the boys from the Wildhawks team are asked to play a pickup game instead of their regular league game, without the parents, coaches, or referees around, interesting things happen.
What fascinated me the most is that the kids that really shone out here were not the kids that were picked as real leaders in a formal competitive environment. And that to me is really, really important. The kids that were real leaders out here, they were taking risks. They were having fun because they don't really get to do that in the other environment. Because if they make a mistake, I mean, you've got bleachers full of fans, spectators, adults, so that you can yell and scream at them. So why would you take a risk?
Suburban kids are so used to this structure in their life. You know, we're here at this time, we have to do it this way. Locus of control has been lost. The kid never understands that he's in control of his life.
It gives them that freedom to be essentially who they think they are. And we're not judging it. And that's huge.
Okay. So what we're going to do is just get back into our groups and have a bit of a chat about the clip, come up with some things that you think are important that are for consideration moving forward as a coach. Obviously, you've got to get the balance right. They're talking about 95% of kids just participating, where you might be in a higher end of performance. But essentially, some of the things that stand out there for me at the beginning were roles and responsibilities. Have you considered that in your pathway? If you play team sport, are you allowing players to play at least 3 or 4 or 5 positions and you rotate them? Do they learn what requirements and roles and responsibilities are required for each of those positions? Because that becomes a learning outcome in itself. It's not how you play in that position, it's what requirements are needed. And it develops a need. I said that this morning, you're creating a need to want to develop. And to rotate creates that need. So if I'm playing 9 and I go to 10, I start to realise, well, 9 needs to be a good passer. So when I go back to 9, I'm more sensitive to passing to 10 in a position where it helps that person. And those are skill sets that are created. So roles and responsibilities, and then function. What's your function as a player in that position? What's my aim to get the ball forward? Okay, and allowing you to express your own creativity as a person. You come into a game, you should be allowed to affect in the way that allows you to do that. But you're responsible. Your individual decision is responsible for the team collective. When you use constraints, use them collectively to design games, but use them individually. You can put individual constraints on players in games. Certain players who are very good, they answer all the questions. They have, under my learning environment, they have a responsibility to answer only questions that no one else can answer. But nobody knows that. And they will be quiet. And their responsibility is to develop 2 leaders every day in every session. So they will ask questions to their teammates and they learn to ask questions. So their role is to develop leaders within the group to get ourselves out of trouble when that player's never going to be there. Okay, so think about those sort of things in your learning environment as well. So I'll give you a few minutes, 5 minutes, just have a quick chat about that video clip and we'll feed back to the group, okay? Alright, just give you a couple of minutes. What you think come out of that clip that's relevant? 1 minute guys.
How long do we have left? I'm not sure.
Yeah, what time have you Okay, I'm just going to start off with a quick question from... I'm sorry to put you in there. We just had a quick chat. Do you mind discussing what we just discussed?
We had a long discussion.
I'm going to leave it to you to sort of figure out what you felt was the most relevant to share amongst the group. But this is about sharing information, and he just shared information. Just listening, guys. Sorry, I hate to disrupt chats. I really do. So I like it. Oh, come on, yeah. Disturber. Can we pass that microphone over? I just really want you to sort of mention something about tennis, about the Japanese one.
Recently, I was coaching this half Japanese boy. He's a wonderful student to teach, not in the sense of skill or anything, but in the sense of attitude. Very well mannered, listens to everything I tell him, and for a boy to tell him once and he actually listens and do it, it's a joy. And whatever I teach him, strokes, footwork, shots, where to hit, it comes out textbook, meaning 10 for 10. I tell him that means he will try to hit that, even if it's not up to the quality I expect. But then recently, I found another player who didn't really receive any formal training or such. But you know, these are those really talented, aggressive, they do the shots in a certain way, they move in a certain way, but you know that the fundamentals of it off. But when these two went to play, they got the boy with talent won. Now, the challenge was, you know, then the father came over and told me, hey, what was this? You know, he lost to someone, doesn't have formal training. What's the point of having a coach? You know, that kind of thing.
Are you still a coach?
Of course I am. I educated to that.
So you adapted and gave him a response. What was your response?
The solution to this was, when I, like what I said to the teacher, to the same thing with the dad, you know, was at the end of the day, it's not the coach that's going to play. At the end of the day, I can't spoon feed him. And, you know, back for my sport, it's badminton. Be whatever sport it is, there's a dynamic scene. You understand? The fundamentals are just guidelines. Yeah, you can learn how to walk, but how you run, how you walk is unique to you. He has to find his own game. But if for every mistake that he made, he just turned around and looked at me for an answer, was not the right way. Because at the end of the day, the victory will not be his, it will be mine.
So remember we talked this morning about finding a way? That's learning, to find a way. He can give the Japanese boy what to do in that way all the time, but it won't always be the way in that situation, will it? So he's very dependent on you because you've been a good coach, but he's very dependent. I'd always advise talking to parents, find out the background of most kids. Maybe a lot of guys who have come off the streets, the poorer kids in England and Australia, tend to be good decision makers. They're very streetwise, very aggressive. And if they see a weakness in another player, they go for the kill. And that could be the talented kid. So what we talked about, you and I just at the end there, was what's your role as a coach now with that Japanese student? It would be, you know, and I was just suggesting it there, is your role is to challenge me, the coach. Because we've now got to a point in some of our pathways where our coaches are deliberately giving wrong information to our players. And in the training session, they want to know what call, and the coach is shouting out to the number 10, just say any call. So the 10 now is shouting out false information to the players, and the players are just going ahead with it. And they realise, shit, he's just made that call. Crikey, that's not the right call. You have to give false information at times to break the dependency. You have to manage that. You don't want him going over to his mum going, he's told me to do this, it's the coach's fault. But what you do in training session is you make those small little failures so he falls over. It's like walking. Your parent doesn't tell you how to walk. You inspire your child, come over here, come to mum, come to daddy. Intention. Remember the middle of the circle was intention? And the baby then, attention, attends to mummy, daddy, and then they fall over. Falling over is a part of intentionally getting to mum. So they find a way, and that becomes their signature movement. That is their signature movement. And you work from that. That's what you work with. You don't work with a template of the shot. The template is a guideline, it's an intention that you may get there, you may never. But they may go and veer off that template and find a new way of doing it that's so unique to their body and their dimensions. So I would try and break that and get the players to challenge you every now and then as a coach. So that Australian sailing coach, the sailors are always challenging him. I bet you I can come up with a better drill than you. And so there's this response, such high level of responsibility with the athletes. And I was speaking to the other American guy that was sailing, sorry, I forgot the name. And we were talking about this, where because it's sailing, is it an excuse to say, well, the athletes are more responsible because it's dynamic and the environment's changing all the time? It's an excuse. Why can't it be in badminton? Surely the shuttlecock's changing and the opponent's changing all the bloody time as well. Why is it suddenly dependent on the coach suddenly and sailing's not? So for me, we're full of these reasons why, when in fact actually we need strategies to actually make the environment more conducive to that. Bringing the parents on board to show them what that looks like is there as well. What came out of that video for you guys on the ground here? That last video we watched, what were some of the main things? On the spot, 5 seconds, 4, 3.
We find that given, I would say, given a structure, the kids may not perform to the best of their abilities because of pressure, nervousness. But once you give a competition during, let's say, training or practice, with less of, say, pressure on them, they tend to perform better. But you need to translate this back to a competition level, because all of us need to go to a competition and we need to manage this. But at the same time, for me, when I train my athletes, I do track and field. So I'll just tell them that, okay, I may not be there to go and tell you what to do. You need to know what to do. You need to warm up. You need to know when to warm up and stuff like that. So when they actually go ahead, coach, is it time for me to warm up?
So they make the decision.
They make the decision. Okay. So one of my boys actually, when you talk about practice, we went. He's primary 6 now, 12 years old. So we made him go through like 5 different events.
Yeah.
So his pet event is high jump.
Yeah.
So in high jump, you can't really shout to him like instructions because he'll be distracted. So I was actually quite thankful for that for him, because he watches his own videos, he practices, and he knows about motivational learning and stuff, where I share with him when he does it. So he actually does what I needed him to do, and he actually performed well, and he won a medal as well. So to me, I'm satisfied. And when I asked him at the end was, what went through your mind when you were going through all this? So for me, as a coach, I'll just ask, like, how do you feel? Do you think you did well? He say, yeah, I did very well. I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, so it's good, and I think your ability as a coach and your skill, you've got to put pressure on yourself when they just give general feedback. Sometimes you're setting yourself up for failure when things go well, because they just go, yeah, it went well, because they got the medal, but in fact they could have got better. So sometimes it's actually saying, well, where could you have got better? And you've probably learned that skill. There must be something that you need to look at and improve upon, because, you know, if you just wait for a loss and then shit, what's going wrong, and then pay attention, it's sometimes, you know, part of development is to continually make mistakes. So we were just having a chat before, I work with a lot of coaches who use competition to support development. So they will, particularly in certain games, put their players under pressure to play in a certain way. So they reduce their options. They can't play that exploits the weaknesses of another team. They have to find another way to beat the opponent. It's particularly quite hard, but if you periodise and have the trust of your players, you will develop mistakes that they will learn from in moments. Other coaches may go, wow, I beat your athlete, but you know really truly down what's actually happening, and your athletes do as well, because they've taken that responsibility. So really, really good point. So what happened at the end of that video? What did they say about when the coach disappeared? What did the players do? Who made the decisions when the coach disappeared?
Players themselves?
Yeah, it wasn't the nominated leaders by the coach. That team there, that's a scientific study in Canada. And the leaders, when the coach wasn't there, it was the other kids that started to make the decisions in that game on the park, because they left the camera rolling. And they suddenly started to express themselves. And they were doing screens. If you watched it then, they were doing screen movements. But they weren't the kids who were dominating the game in the competitive environment. I'm not saying we do that all the time, because you've got to, you know, obviously go through the pathway itself. But wow, you can develop a lot of talent from late maturers, kids who are going to grow up late, get a bit bigger later. If you're smaller, you have to find more solutions to the problem. So my research in the PhD was decision making in rugby. Your best players in Australian rugby were never picked at 16 and 18. They were too small. They were late maturers. Stephen Larkham, Georgie Greig and O'Connor, those guys, because they're the best decision makers, but they stayed in the game. So they must have had coaches which encouraged them and inspired them to stay in the game. And if they stayed in the game, they were sort of third, fourth quartile. So you know the first, second quartile get picked generally in physical sports because they're bigger. They get the performance opportunities. They're not necessarily any better. But if we look at talent there and then instead of potential, we're going to make that mistake. So I think a learning environment, you have to have good learning principles in terms of selection and developed talent in there as well. You guys might have experienced a bit of that actually in your sports. So yeah, just anything else that come from that clip that you think was important?
I think the clip really was about...
Thanks, mate. You may disagree with some things, which is great. You don't have to agree with everything there.
Thank you. No, it's okay.
Very sensitive, I think.
And you mentioned about how a player needs to stay long enough in the game to be good. And the video actually talks about how kids these days, they fall out of the game because they lose motivation. So the key here, right, is really how can we increase intrinsic motivation in kids. So we spoke about coaching style.
Yeah.
If we are always very directly, we are telling the kids what they do all the time, they may not have this sense of autonomy or competence.
Yeah.
So what do we do then? Do we adopt a more asking style of coaching? When we adopt a more asking style of coaching, we had a discussion here, and what we talked about was that we felt uncomfortable with silence. So because the kids will just keep quiet, because they are simply not used to being questioned. When we don't make use of questioning, they will not be thinking, and they wouldn't be independent learners, and they wouldn't have this sense of autonomy as well.
Yes.
So I guess the challenge for us in Singapore is to get comfortable with silence,
yes.
Be patient.
Yeah.
No, after 2 or 3 months, the kids will start speaking. We've got to be patient.
Who's got children here? Has their own children? Are you comfortable in silence with your kids? Exactly. Coaching's like parenting. It's no different. You're comfortable with your kids, but it's uncomfortable with other people's kids in the session, and it's like, shit, I've got to ask a question, break the silence. But you're so right, you're so right. I think the problem is with sports science is that it's led the way we coach. Don't feel you have to ask a question because the style of questioning says I have to ask a question. If you don't need to ask a question, don't ask one. Who asks the ultimate question in sport? Who should ask the real questions? The sport. If you interact with sport, it's asking you questions all the time, isn't it? Here's a problem. Come up with a solution. That's the question. So when they come off, if they've engaged in the game, they already know the questions and they haven't come up with the answers. So it's a very simple process. If you engage them in the game is the teacher, it asks the questions. I think where we've gone wrong is we stick to static styles. So if you say telling is down one end and then selling is down the other, let's adopt a more selling type style. That's very static. Remember the continuum this morning? We're dynamic people, we're humans, we're not robots. You don't fix down one end, you move up and down. So there may be more of an emphasis in your session to be more question-based today, but you don't stick down there. You may go a little prescriptive to get it going. Say, Jesus, a bit quiet, a little bit of structure now. Right, this is what we're doing, let's get going, let's crack on. And then suddenly they're talking, they're involved, the intensity is really high, they back off. And then go into a different sort of style, which is more, what do you think, guys? And they're probably rocking already. So what I would encourage you to do is experiment like the sailing coach. Be creative, explore different styles according to the needs of your athletes. And again, it comes back down to the needs of your athletes. Don't go down the questioning approach like at school, where it's really useless questioning. Right guys, what did we learn from the last 10 minutes? And it always goes at the end of the practice session. Try and have that conversation after 3 minutes. If you have that conversation at the end of a session, you have that after 5 minutes in a training session, they're going to learn a lot more in your session. Instead of saying, right, well, we learned a lot today, let's go away and think about this and this, do that after 5 minutes. Play a really phonetic game at the beginning, and then have that conversation and say, right, you've got 30 more minutes now to fix it. Okay? You're responsible, guys. You've got 30 minutes. I'm going to time you. You know, and give them that responsibility. It's how you coach. It's how you talk to them, how you deliver it. Don't get fixed on certain theories. Just fluidly move in and out, but be aware of the theory. Don't let it direct you too much. Sports science to answer. I am a sports scientist. So really good point. I really like that one. In school, you ask me a question. I'm going to give you an answer to satisfy who? I'm the student. I'm going to give the teacher an answer to satisfy who? You or me? The teacher. That's what we're groomed at school to do. I want to give the correct answer. There's no correct answer in sport. The correct answer was what happened in that situation. So the kid needs to engage in the situation and be honest about this is what I did, this is why I did. You come with this questioning approach at the end, they're going to think, shit, what does the coach want here? And they'll just tell you something and think, phew, that was the right answer, thank God. It's not honest, it's not true, it's more school questioning. I'd get away from that if I were you as quickly as possible. Don't ask those sort of questions, just be a bit more authentic about it. Does that make sense? Am I sort of hitting the head there a bit? Good. Okay, anything else on the video clip? There's not long left. I want to shoot through a little bit more stuff. I want you to watch this clip.
Born and raised in the rugby league heartland of the Hunter Valley coalfields, Andrew and elder brother Matthew were the sons of a Cessnock miner, footballer and coach.
At Cessnock, there isn't a lot to do. Like as a kid growing up, there isn't a lot to do back then. Of course, you have Nintendos, Sony PlayStations, things like that. So you're sort of restricted to certain things you can do. And I mean, like any kid's growing up, sport was a huge thing to get back down to the crew over a soccer ball or rugby league.
The Cessnock backyard became a mini field of dreams as the brothers acted out their football fantasies with games of skill and ambition. Their brotherly competitiveness translated to on-field success as their junior careers took flight. As a rugby league education, it was a preschool for champions.
We lived in the central part of the town and never had a lot of people around us, like younger people, so they had to play with each other. And that's probably what they did. They made up all those little games.
You've got to learn basics. Me and Matthew playing in the backyard, whether we knew it or not, we're just, probably learning all the basics. We grew up around football. Our enjoys the training and then watching other players.
There's only so many games you can play one-on-one in the backyard, so you start to invent different little games. We used to invent kicking games and games where we invent any goal, we'd sober the ball, we'd soak right up. At the time, you know, it was just good fun to catch a soaking ball. If you can handle soaking ball, you can handle those things.
They used to do different things with different balls. They might play a league with a tennis ball or a golf ball. Passing competitions against holes in the garage wall. They punched a hole in the wall and drew the circle, put the numbers on it. That was there for years, wasn't it? Wasn't that to fix it?
We had 2 palm trees that they used to kick through.
And they played cricket with a cricket stump and a golf ball. You know, one golf flat out and the other like a bat, and they swapped it in. And it was always competitive.
What really shines through in that clip for you? One of the world's best rugby league players that ever was. 2 of them, 2 brothers. So what led to, in their background, led to them being so skillful and great decision makers?
Having a backyard.
Who said that? Have they got backyards here? You need a lot of people jumping out of apartments. So, what did they do in their backyard? What was the key skills that they developed?
They play different sports. They play
different sports. Yeah, we know from the research, it's particularly in Australia, and it doesn't matter, individual sports, team sports. You played at least 4 sports. Multi-sports, often team sports, and they've played 1 to 2 individual sports as well. And they've transferred the skills. So when you specialise, probably after 14, you'll notice that those people who haven't specialised, their performance is below, and then when they do specialise, they rise above the rest of the group because they've played more sports and they've transferred those skills to their primary sport. There's research now to suggest having a donor sport. So we work with England Football, and their donor sport is parkour. Parkour is one of the best donor sports if you do anything to do with agility and movements in sort of smaller spaces. Okay, you learn different techniques, different actions, different mobility. So having a donor sport means you have continual engagement in another sport, and it donates back into your primary sport. We're losing that these days, I think, that sort of ability to do those sort of things, because the environment's so structured. Kids are moving, you know, they have to do so many things and they miss out a lot on the sports side. Yeah, so good point. Anything else? Well, what were the parents' role? Yeah, supportive. Why were they supportive? Who here could honestly say, you know, if a kid smashed a wall in the garage wall, what would happen? Detention for 2 months. Well, the parents weren't allowed to fix it, were they? Well, we weren't allowed to fix it. And he was proud, he laughed and said we weren't allowed to fix it. Because the garage and the backyard was the field of dreams. So your training sessions with your players are a field of dreams. They're going to look back in 10 years' time and go, that's where I learned. That's what got me here. And if you make them feel good, they're going to remember you as a coach that made them feel good. They won't remember what you taught them. They'll go, geez, I think I learned quite a bit. I don't know where I learned, but I learned with that coach. And they made me feel good. Implicit learning, they made me feel good. They made me feel I could be the best player there ever was. And that's pretty much the learning environment you want, because unfortunately, as a coach at that level, you don't get praised. Not for another 10 years. You should be the highest paid coaches. You're the most important coaches through that development pathway. But you don't get the credence, you don't get the acknowledgement until those players move on and someone manages them and they get all the gold and the glory. But essentially it's through that pathway. So you need good coaches who really nurture the development of these players. Just play this clip here.
I think I learned how to challenge a body of thinking. And I guess I had the freedom, you know, like growing up in Kingaroy here, in the backyard full of cricket net, it wasn't about any particular rank or order. It was about just living what I thought was true to my own game.
So here we are, playing this Matthew Hayden backyard pitch.
Oh man, if these pieces of grass here out here is that he's screaming bloody murder. The afternoon battles. Yeah, we're pretty competitive. I firmly believe that every backyard shapes someone's destiny. For me, the game was always hit towards the onside for the nesting magpies. And those two big pepperoni trees that sat there. And so that onside play was something which naturally developed rapidly, because I used to love seeing you go over and get bombarded by the magpies. But, you know, just simple things like in between the silky oak trees, playing straight, you know, was something that all those years later when Billy Brown first sat me down and said, son, you want to be good at opening batsman, you got to play straight. And here I was all those years ago getting extra points, earning them because that was the game that played down the ground. That's what most test wickets are like these days. We were out of our time, weren't we? We had our little boxes up, you know, stumps. So when night time fell, and we were getting collared by mum to come in, this is where we continue on playing.
It was interesting that not every ball went where it was intended, because there's scuff marks on the roof.
What we call the Monday bounces, yeah, the hand-to-header. There was no ball, it was just fair game. Not a broken window here, I don't think. That's why I always play on here. We're talking about onside out there. Here, offside, there was more room to manipulate strike on this side. Whereas here, there was window, and of course you get out and get on the ball. So being a left-hander, I always felt naturally disadvantaged. My brother's right-handed, so he's no doubt, you know, a really good cover driver and offside player, whereas I was rubbish onside player, but I'm a bad onside player.
Isn't that amazing? All those years later in Test cricket, your game, and probably putt shot, which you never really enjoyed that much, might have been shaped by the rule never to break the window.
So how, as a coach, can you create windows in your game? It's essentially, it's constraint. So that window is a constraint, and it shapes the best, two of the best Test match cricketers in Australia. Two oak trees. How could you put them on a badminton court? How could the player decide where those two oak trees should be to perfect a smash in certain areas? Because they're just going to be two markers. So I know that all the research has pointed this way. So how can we structure an unstructured environment? That's the challenge. How can you structure an unstructured sort of environment that suits your athletes and their needs? I don't want to play that one. I just want to finish off with Danny to see anyone into hockey here? Team sports, hands up. Individual sports? No sport? Hopefully we can hear Danny. No, we can't. I'll see if the second one's any better. No, it's okay. I won't bother. I'll finish because we're getting close now. I'll just see if there's any more. Just on that last clip, I want to finish on that note because what's actually happening in golf is your best athletes are choosing and selecting their coaches, which I think may be the future. They know their game if we develop responsible learners, and if they need to perfect the game in a certain area, they'll go and see a certain coach. And that may be just the way that that's going to happen. It's already happening in golf. It may happen in other sports. If your philosophy doesn't suit their needs, they may decide elsewhere, but that's not the case at the moment. And what I think there is Rory McIlroy, the best coaches I've worked with around the world, will normally fit with this graph here. The athletes, in every session you have, there's a high element of search. So in that search there, the athletes are finding things out. They're trialing and they're learning. They're exploring. And each of your sessions must have a high percentage of this. Even if you're focusing on performance, you are learning to perform. So there's an element of learning in everything you do. And they have to find things out. So they've got to discover something in every session. And that may be 2 or 3 things in one session, or it could be one thing over a whole season. Big thing. But that's what periodizes over the year. And then the last level there, so that's about refining. Okay, so a lot of mistakes, performance is variable. Here you get more consistency. Here, this is about skill. That's where players really exploit and adapt at a very, very high level. So the stuff I talked about this morning and tomorrow will be about more elite athletes, and that will be the high skill level where you plan for mistakes and you put high amounts of pressure or unpredictable pressure on your athletes, and that's where they have to adapt and respond. Because working in the Olympic Games, who are the athletes who do quite well? Generally are the ones who do their first Olympic Games. There's no pressure on them. They're quite relaxed. They don't know what to expect. And they're quite talented. And they give it everything and they find a way. The next Olympic Games they come back, they're nervous. They're not sure, can they replicate? They overthink it. They overanalyze. They don't have fun. They don't try things out. And that generally will be the trend. So having a learning environment that has search, discover and exploit, and look at those in detail, think about what that looks like in your sport, because that's really a good learning environment at all levels, a high skill level. So for the team sport, Eddie Jones has come in and said, you guys need to find a way, you need to discover it quickly because you've only got 1 more year to go to Japan and win a World Cup. Okay, so the last 6 Nations, him deliberate fatiguing the guys before the 6 Nations, ran them into the ground. So by the time we got to the 6 Nations, we were already cooked. Players are thinking, geez, but we wanted to learn. Could we respond? But we couldn't. So we actually learned something about ourselves because we got put into a situation where we searched, tried to discover a way out, but we couldn't find a way. So we know we can't find a way out being that fatigued. So we need to get fitter for the next World Cup so we don't get that fatigued. You don't know until you actually go to the darkness down below. You've got to go to those places to learn about yourself. So as a coach, your learning environment has to have what I call a learning dip. Each session should have 2 or 3 learning dips, and the players need to be able to get out before the end of the training session and feel good. Wow, didn't really perform well in parts, but I found a way out. What's the solution? This technique, this action, this decision. Coaches help me get out, I feel really good. And there's some learning outcomes. So don't have perfect practice. Messy practice, neat performance. Train ugly. Allow them to create the perfection and the order. Okay? And support them through that process. Support them by giving them some solutions along the way. So I think we'll just spend the last 2 minutes going around the room, and I'll just pick some random people and just say one thing that is important and that you think you may already do it. I know a lot of you here are quite good coaches. So just give us one thing that you think you're going to take home and you're going to try and implement and adapt. So, do we have that microphone anywhere?
It says.
Yeah, do you want to go first? Me? Yeah. Thanks for nominating. Self-directed nomination.
Please, let the property so I can have a backup. I think one thing that struck me was I associate it with the self-determination theory, where in order for kids to be intrinsically motivated to continue in sport, you need to give them a sense of competence. The need for autonomy must be there, and
self-determination
positive learning environment.
Absolutely. No, really good self-determination theory aligns with most of this. We use a lot of that research. So absolutely really well picked up for those of you who haven't heard that before. You carry the microphone around like you're the host now. You pick who you want.
Who's going next?
The girl next to you actually, she looks pretty smart.
Yeah, I think lots of interesting things from this morning, this afternoon as well. Certainly I identify with a lot of the things that everybody raised in terms of limitations, in terms of culturally, in particular trying to get players to lead sessions, asking questions, and obviously that's a process. That takes time, and I think that's same with implicit learning. So time is actually one of the other limitations.
Yes, time constraints, yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, my huddle was mostly team sport, so then there's the dynamic as well that sort of at which stage is your team at in the beginning. Yeah. So that's another factor that has to be taken into consideration.
Absolutely. Because the needs will be different, won't they, at different phases of development. So it's recognising what are their needs at that point. Look, a part of breaking structure, some of the strategies will be to have very high intensity sessions, very fast. You don't allow anybody to organise and settle themselves. So they're very rushed. They don't have time to calm down, because we have this problem in the England rugby team. We thought the best players would be from the best club, Saracens, but they're actually the problem players, because they get time in their club to organise. They come to England, it's so quick, they're telling all the players, slow down, control, control. But the other players are very happy to go at high speed and control at a high speed. So who's slowing who? Are we going to wait for the players down here, or are those going to catch up? So what we do is put time constraints on and just say, line out, 3, 2, 1, and if they lose it, we just change position. If you're going to keep doing it, you're going to learn the hard way. So, and it's tough, what I call harsh love, tough love, but it's a very good coaching strategy, provided you support players and you give them feedback. And just go, look, what are you going to do about it as the game's going on? Sort something out, find a solution. Give them a solution every now and then, be prescriptive, and say, look, try this, play around with it, see what happens. See if you get any opportunities out of it. So mix your style again, but really, really good. You get the responsibility now of passing on the microphone. When the head turns around, yes please. Got time for 3 more, yeah? 3 more.
The interesting thing was the learning depth, and how do you create a sense of productive failure in a coaching session instead of always aiming for success. And really to be happy and comfortable with some chaos and messiness in the whole thing, and getting them to that dark place, and then seeing how creative we are to get them out of it as well, the guidance.
Yeah. Probably more, it's a comment really, yeah? Yeah, no questions on it, yeah.
I think the biggest challenge for all coaches is dare to change and dare to fail. This is the biggest challenge. And with regard to the parents, for myself, my personal experience, few parents in fact approach me and say that their children learn something, but they are not the champions. And they enjoy taking the sports because what we share with the children is more important than we. I always told all my students or my archers, we have 100 participants, only 3 winners. 97 doesn't get anything. So we have to put across what is the expectation. And the parents, the biggest challenge we are facing now is not the athlete, it's not the children, but the parents. This is the worst experience that we have. But not all parents, some parents are okay. So I believe to change is a challenge, and by changing, we might fail to produce champions in the short term. But maybe you look into the long terms, yes, we can produce more champions.
Thank you. Well said, well said. Look, I might sort of leave it there. If there's anybody down the back area who wants to say anything in conclusion, is there? Just yell out. Anybody wants to say anything? I think that's a really good point to finish. I haven't deliberately put up a slide which has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do this and you'll have a perfect environment. I don't think it works that way. I've seen some very engaged people today. I've seen your faces. I think certain things are challenging. Certain things you're like, wow, that's it. I know this. I believe this is what I'm trying to do. I think some coaches want to feel there's a need for change, but they don't quite have the skills, or they don't feel comfortable, or they don't have support. And they think, if I do this, how am I going to be perceived by other people? So it's managing expectations. And trying to create a community of coaches. I think Tom probably knows, but in rugby in New Zealand, there was a community of coaches that they've done through an accelerator program. And they've got quite a few coaches who ring each other up every week. One's the All Black coach, one's the netball coach, and they ring each other up. Geez, how am I going to get out of this one? This is what's happening in my environment. So a community of coaches here, if you're going to try and develop Singapore decision makers in all sports who can play all sports, imagine producing a country where you have multi-sport athletes who go on and can pick and choose. I mean, that's what's happening in the Olympic Games and the Winter Olympics. The first girl who's won Olympic medals in 2 or 3 disciplines. Freestyle and then downhill skiing. Why can't they? Why, if you specialise, there's no chance of doing that. So, what are the strengths here? What's the cultural dynamics? And I think that's where, with some good learning principles in an environment and a community of coaching where you share information, you have to share, you will strengthen the whole group and the whole country as a result. So, thanks for listening, and really appreciate it, and thanks for your time as well. Thanks for coming down. Cheers.
We're going to get Richard here to answer some questions. If you have questions for Richard, Richard, you want to take the seat? Anyone has got any questions for Richard? If not, I'm going to start off with my question, because Richard has been working with a lot of top-class coaches, and I'm just curious, is that something that the coaches buy into, and that they are familiar with constraint-based coaching and creating the sort of learning environment that he was sharing this afternoon about safe uncertainty? So how does he go about working with coaches like Eddie Jones?
Does everybody know who Eddie Jones is first? Just put your hands up if you're not sure who he is, and I'll let you know. Just some bloke off the street, mate, don't worry about it. Vinnie Jones. He knows Vinnie Jones. Yeah, don't cross him in a dark street. Eddie Jones is the current coach of the England rugby team. He coached in Australia. First of all, his background is half Japanese. I think he's half Australian, half Japanese. He grew up in a school in Sydney. He got bullied as a kid because it was fairly racist. Certain parts of Australia, maybe background. Got a lot of bullying at school. He developed a skill set to be quite tough and resilient. He's quite a tough character. He grew up in a class where he played physical education every day, but it didn't satisfy the PE requirements curriculum because the coach just goes, play touch rugby every day. So physical education was playing touch rugby every day. What happened? Elder Brothers, and they produced 3 or 4 of the world's most outstanding rugby union players because they played rugby every day for PE. It could have been hockey, it could have been badminton, it just happened to be that way. Eddie Jones became a coach, and he became very structured, very directive. He knew what he wanted, because that came about his experience as a young boy. He believed in himself, he wouldn't allow anyone to push him around. He didn't, as we say, take any shit. And he became quite a respected coach by players who wanted to be told what to do. And he developed you know, some players who were actually quite skillful without him, but when he got hold of them, they were very successful. And as a result of that, he went up to the Wallabies and didn't have as much success using the same approach. And I think that lack of success got to him. His personality, he got angry. He wanted more control. He got more directive, to the point where he lost probably the whole country, he lost the sport, lost the respect of most people, and left Australia. And I think, this is my perception, most good coaches haven't had their judgment day, they haven't had redemption. There's been something in their life where they want redemption, and it drives them through to success. Eddie Jones, his redemption is that he was a control freak, and he was very directive, and he wanted to change. He left Australia, went to Japan. He received a phone call from a good friend of his, who had spoken to him for many years, given him much advice, but he never listened to, really. And it was Bob Dwyer, a former Wallaby coach, who was a physical education teacher, and said, mate, give the responsibility to the players. Take the pressure off yourself. You've got some pretty good players there, let them play. And he changed his style and philosophy in Japan. Obviously had a very good beat, who did they beat? South Africa. He learnt a lot in 2 years. Before that he had a heart attack because he was too pressured coming from Australia. He picked up Buddhism, I think. He's fairly sort of got beliefs and values now in the religion. But he believes in his players. He believes that they will make good decisions. He's there for his players. He's very supportive now, extremely supportive, and will not criticise you for making a bad decision. He goes, I picked you, I helped prepare you, it's my fault. So he will back you 100%. 100% he will back you. And every player wants to play for him now. He will not turn on them because they've played differently under pressure, because they were fatigued. He will place trust in them that they will make better decisions. So he's changed. Why? He listened to a good friend of his. Yeah, it's a message that I've got to finish my answer. So yeah, Eddie Jones has been on a journey, and I think that's a reflection of, you guys may know some good Singaporean coaches who've been on a journey as well. You tend to go through a journey. When you start coaching, you coach the way you've been coached. You'll be quite prescriptive, quite directive, you do a lot of drills, a lot of technical stuff. Then you go away from that. You give more questioning, a bit more responsibility, then you go into more culture, more psychology, more culture. You start to tend to go along that journey, and Eddie Jones sort of has progressed quite quickly now towards the latter end of his career. But someone like Wayne Smith transformed very early on. Some coaches are more adaptive, and they adapt very quickly and accelerate a lot quicker. Whereas some people like Eddie are very resistant to change. My way's the right way, it's going to work. He could do it for 20 years and it still won't. He said, it's going to work at some stage. Well, yeah, so he adapted, and now he's really learned from it. So yeah, it's a pressure environment though, working with him.
Any questions from the floor? I've got another question. A lot of time we are talking about team sports and territorial sports, so it's quite easy to create this sort of safe uncertainty. What about the close skill sports like maybe cycling and maybe shooting? You know, could you just give a little bit more example of how you create them in order for them to better their skills?
Good question. Going back to the AIS, there was one case study I worked with a girl called Anna Mears. She was indoor sprint cycle champion for Australia. She was preparing for, was it Beijing? Yeah, it was Beijing. And she had never beaten Pendleton, the British champion, the world Olympic champion. So I got invited down to the velodrome in Adelaide, and a mate of mine was the assistant coach, and Gary Street's the coach, and they said, look, we want to do some decision-making, skill acquisition with Anna Mears. I went down there and I sat in and sat with the head coach, and the head coach said to me, look, we think it's time that Anna Mears actually made some decisions. And like, wow, you know, she's been doing this for so long. And I said, do you not make any decisions? And they said, no, we just train on the bike, we do power outputs, and we just cycle as fast as we can, you know, and make sure the engine's right. But we've been losing some races because we think we haven't made good decisions. And then he said to me, he said, look, we found a black book. One day Anna Mears left the hotel room and she left the black book under a pillow, and in that black book she had written every race from what she could remember about her opponent, why her opponent beat her or why she beat her opponent, and what she would do next time. And he found it and he presented it to her, and she got quite embarrassed. Like, she didn't really want anyone to see it. And then basically it's a performance analyst book, like a performance analyst would do that. But she did it because she wanted to do it. She felt there was a need to do it, to get better. And so he found that. He said, wow, this is brilliant, Anna. This is brilliant. Can we help you? Can we give some of this to our performance analyst? And then he had the idea to ring me up and say, look, let's put her into a situation where we can now train decision making. So I came down. One of the key areas to win a race is Anna Mears has got a very fast twitch fibre. She's very powerful. She can sprint very quickly over a short distance, but she can't maintain it for too long. Pendleton is a good sprinter for longer distances, but not as fast. So what's your decision? Well, she needs Pendleton to be ahead of her, so she can take it to as long as she can to the end of the race at a slower pace and then put the power on for a short distance. And she knew she could win one race doing that. They were 1-1 in the Olympic Games and it came to the last race. And apparently I was just told by Vince and somebody that Anna Mears just presented at a conference on the Gold Coast about this particular event, training event. And I was just so nice to have lunch and then listen to the stories. I was just reliving it. It's obviously had an effect on her. She trained, and it's called the bike stall. You know how you stall the bike on the velodrome, and you go to a complete standstill. But there's no brakes on the bike, so you go up the hill and you just got to hold it, hold it, hold it. The reason why you do that is so you can concede someone has to overtake you, so you can go from behind and control the race. And that's the only way she could get that second race. She always used to train under no pressure and just practice the technique. And she always had issues. So when I got down there, I designed a practice session with the head coach and Nick Flyger, the assistant coach. And she had a couple of these, what we call games. So the guys who are cycling around the track for a warm-up, she would pick one of them and she'd ride up behind them and then say, right, it's you and me, let's go for it. And I'll take you on the next corner. So as they get to the next corner, there was a competition to see who could come out of it second would be the winner. And she'd do this 4 or 5 times and she lost virtually all of them. And she cried and came down to the track side and blamed me, and I got kicked out of the velodrome because she was failing. She'd never trained like this before. And the head coach knew what was happening and said, Rick, you're going to have to leave. Anna doesn't want you here. She only wants people who are going to help her win. So I had to leave. I flew back up to the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra, and obviously the coach knew that she would eventually come around and go, look, I knew what you were doing, okay, I've recovered, let's go for it again. So we got back into that sort of training the following week, and she accepted the challenge, and she perfected her bike stall, turned it into a skill. She trained it against opposition. She timed her bike stall against people who were doing different things in front of her. And she started to realise that it's no point doing closed, technical, individual work unless you're putting it under pressure. So she found the balance, and yeah, she really adopted it and got success from it. And I think in the individual sport, it's working through somebody who has the respect of that athlete. So if you're a head coach and you've got the rapport with that athlete, you can design pressure situations which makes them feel uncomfortable. But they need to know that you trust them. They need to know you've got their support. They don't want to be thrown into the cold, into the fireplace and be left there to burn. They need to know that people are there causing you problems to make you better. And I would actually talk to athletes. I say, look, today's going to be pretty tough. You're going to be in the learning pit, and I won't be there to get you out because I'll be digging the pit for you to fall into. Oh, okay, so I've got to try and find a way out. Yeah, you've got to try and find a way out today. You remember all the training we've done over the last 3 months? That will help you get out. And so that's skill. And having that confidence to get out the learning thing. Did it today, I did it. And getting that repeat confidence and success from that comes from a little bit of managed uncertainty, but safety. And I can't reiterate that a bit more. So, yeah, it was nice listening to that story today about Emma Mears. I think she trusted a coach. Her coach has just recently died. He had Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, I'm not sure which one, but she's incredibly close to her coach. One thing I've noticed with individual sports is the relationship between coach and athlete. It's incredibly close and trusting, and you've got to nurture that relationship, otherwise you can't do a lot of stuff that we've talked about. It's about people. It's about who they are, who you are, and opening up as friends and getting that trust, and then you can throw variability and uncertainty into that. Otherwise, you know, it can be quite damaging at times. So I had the trust of Coach Gary Street and Anna's coach. Anna trusted her coach, who trusted me. So there was a link there. So we don't do these things like willy-nilly, we plan them. So.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions now? If not, please join me in thanking Richard. Just before you go away, just like this morning session, we really